Hello, James. Professor James Nedumpara. It's such a pleasure to be here with you in New Delhi at the Center for Trade and Investment Law. I just have a few questions for you, and thanks again for the invitation. So, can you introduce yourself and what you do here at the Center for Trade and Investment Law?
So, thank you, Dr. James Remy, for accepting our invitation and coming for this conference in Delhi and for the workshop today. My name is James Nedumpara. I am the head of the Center for Trade and Investment Law, which is a think tank established by the government for helping the government with trade policy matters. And I am also the WTO Chair at the Center.
Excellent. And what sort of projects or advice do you offer to the government of India in trade and investment law?
Our center is actually a think tank and an advisory center. So we help the government with, with the research activities. We also help the government in trade negotiations. Sometimes we help the government in dispute settlement matters. And we are also involved in running the trade lab project in India. So we have got a multiplicity of activities focusing on research, capacity building, trade, and some kind of academic orientation, trade policy making.
Yes, and it's really an impressive center. You have a lot of very able young people here, and a lot of clearly a very high standing among the practitioners as well as the government and the business community here in India. So well done. And as chair of India, I'm the WTO chair for the University of the West Indies in Barbados. So it's really a privilege to also be able to come here and see how you run your program under the chair, and as you mentioned, Trade Lab, which is this consortium or network of universities all around the world that provide advice to clients and give really from the perspective of students who are third-year law students or master's students in law. So it's great to see that alive and very well in India. So I have two questions for you. One is, where do you see India and India trade policy in terms of where it's being directed now? What are the issues of particular interest for the Indian government and the private sector at this stage of its trade and investment policy?
This year actually marks the 75th year of India's independence. So 75 years is a fairly long time. And India has come a long way in the last 75 years. India is now the fifth largest economy in the world. And India is perhaps the most populous world, almost going to surpass China in terms of the sheer number of population.
Yes.
India has challenges, being a highly populous country. But at the same time, India is a very young nation. India's major strength is basically in its demography. Most of the, I think more than 75% of the population are still very young. And that gives India a huge amount of competitive advantage. So when you really look at India, I think one should not actually look at India's past. India, since in the early 70s and 80s, India had some kind of an import substitution policy and fairly restricted trade policy. But over a period of time, India has basically transformed itself. At the moment, India is actually an emerging giant. And that is reflected in the fact that India is now negotiating a large number of trade agreements. Initially, India was looking at the Southeast Asian countries for trade engagement and free trade agreement activities. But at the moment, India is now in a position to negotiate agreements with very advanced countries like the UK, the European Union, Canada, and some of the other advanced economies in the world, Australia, for instance. So India's future will depend upon the kind of bold steps that we take at the moment. And as a center, we are playing a very important role in ensuring that India's participation is actually strong, and the participation will make sure that India comes out of the trade deal by getting really some good advantages, trade concessions, and at the same time making sure that these trade agreements serve the Indian people in the long run. And given the large size of India's population, the kind of stake India has in the global affairs, my feeling is that the next 25 years will define India's role in the international trading system. And India is in a way well poised to make a mark because of the positive things. But at the same time, I should also be, highlighting some of the challenges India has. Poverty is still fairly common in India. India has got many other challenges as well. And climate change is another challenge. So there are new challenges of the future, right? Which needs to be addressed as well. So we look at this kind of trade agreements with not as a solution to all the problems, but a very important component in reshaping India's future, and at the same time making sure that India plays a key role in making this world trading system or global trading system better.
Excellent. And one thing that struck me about your response is how many countries want to engage with India at the bilateral and regional levels. And I'm curious what role you see there for the WTO, which is, maybe receding into less significance for a lot of countries in terms of their trading priorities. I note as I was giving a lecture today to the participants at the workshop that India is the 5th largest or most active user of dispute settlement, and some of the really interesting cases, which no doubt the center has had a role in bringing or supporting the government in, really interesting cases. So I'm just curious, well, two things. One is the WTO still a relevant place for India? And two, where are the connections that regions like the Caribbean can have with India? As I was mentioning to you, one of the first places that the Caribbean and the Prime Minister Motley of Barbados got support from in supplying vaccines during COVID-19 was actually from Prime Minister Modi in India. So there's definitely a role, I think, for India in the global south and leadership. So first, what is the relevance of the WTO? And second, how can India provide support, leadership, camaraderie, coalition building with places like the Caribbean?
So you have got two questions. One is actually India's approach to WTO. The WTO is a central institution in the field of multilateral trade. And it has done a phenomenal amount of work in the last 20 years. Like with any institution, there will be challenges. And given the nature of the functioning of WTO, the administrative setup or the institutional nature of WTO, decision making will be difficult. But at the same time, you had to find common solution to some of the challenging problems of the world. Ultimately, I am of the hope that these kind of engagements, the bilateral engagements, the plurilateral engagements, the preferential trade agreements, they all actually lead to the same place, the ultimate goal. And in that ultimate goal, the WTO will have a place. And when we really look at international institutions, you can't actually judge it based upon some really difficult experience in the last 4 or 5 years. We had to look at the institution in the long run. And WTO is there, it is here to stay. And it is actually one of the, the strongest supporter of the WTO system. Some of the principles of the WTO are difficult, like the consensus principle. But that also again reflects the equality principle. The equality and the equal concern for everyone. Right? In a world which is actually going through a pretty difficult phase, finding consensus on most of the issues will be difficult. That doesn't mean that the principle upon which the system is actually built is bad. So there will be challenges, and India will actually, given India's now role as a G20 president, India can use this kind of leadership position to make a meaningful reform of the WTO. So reforms are necessary in WTO, and the reforms will have to be equitable, reforms will have to be inclusive, and reforms will have to be development oriented. And at the same time taking into concern the new challenges of the world. And I'm sure there will be a positive development in this area. Well, talking about the regional engagement, India has traditionally been the champion of the developing countries. India, not only the NAM movement in the past, India has been an active player in the G77, the group of 77 countries. India had, even now, India has very good relationship with the Caribbeans, with the Latin American countries, and with Africa.
Yes.
Right? So India has, traditional links to this thing. And one important point which I want to mention is basically the Indian diaspora. So traditionally, even when India negotiates a free trade agreement with the UK, there is a substantial amount of Indian diaspora in the UK, right? This may be true with the European Union, this may be true with Singapore for that matter. So a lot of Indians are now working and contributing.
It's true in the Caribbean.
Absolutely.
We have a
Yes.
very strong presence of the Indian community mixed into the rest of the Caribbean community, and it's a beautiful alignment and collaboration and cultural heritage with the Indian diaspora in the Caribbean.
Absolutely. To even literature, I think like V.S. Naipaul.
Yes.
We and
curry in the Caribbean is huge.
So there's a very strong ties with the Caribbeans, and not only with that particular region.
Yes.
Right. So in a way, our only problem is actually the distance. Sometimes distance can also play a role in basically not allowing the friendship to grow beyond a particular stage. But I think now with the with the technology, with other kinds of facilitation,
yes,
these kind of barriers can be overcome.
And we look forward to welcoming you for a visit at the Sridath Ramphal Center. Excellent. So the final question that I have for you relates to the Remaking Global Trade for a Sustainable Future project that I'm co-leading with Dan Esty, Professor Dan Esty from Yale University, and Professor Joel Trackman from Tufts University. And this project, and you're on the steering committee for this project, is really aimed at reforming the WTO system so that it can take on the challenges of and opportunities for the sustainable future, whether it's in the environment, climate change, social dimensions, digital economy. All of these areas, the blue economy, all of these areas come under the portfolio of the Remaking Trade Project. And one of the reasons I'm here visiting is really to host with the CTIL a workshop on India and sustainability. And there were two areas that we jointly agreed to have a one-day workshop on, and that is on sustainability and industrialization, and sustainability and agriculture, two major issues for India as it begins to think about the future and trade. So I was wondering if you could give us a sort of a brief synopsis of the topic, India's position on it, and what major themes you think we can draw on from these topics in terms of thinking about how the trading system must be more susceptible to change in light of India's concerns.
Right. At the very outset, sustainability is actually the most important concept to which there is a unanimous appeal. And that is why the United Nations has adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, and there is an end date to meeting some of these goals. While some countries may have a particular target date for meeting some of the goals, eventually we have to meet the goals. So this project is very useful in identifying the areas where there can be better cooperation and how the rule book can be accordingly transformed or reformed for that matter. So it is an extremely important project. I think the future of our world will depend upon some of the decisions that we take in this decade or maybe the next decade.
Absolutely.
And that way, this is a very inclusive project led by two eminent academics, including you for that matter, and having a very wide international participation in terms of the steering committee and others. So my belief is that change will be slow in certain institutions, but change will happen. And the most important thing is, as we highlighted yesterday, is to remain engaged, stay engaged with the most even some of the developed world or developing countries, even on sensitive issues. So we had discussion on two important areas. One is actually the industrialization for a decarbonized economy, and the second is sustainable practice in agriculture. The two issues are not easy subjects. By no means they are very easy, and it actually reflects the concerns of some of the people. Whenever you have to reform, accommodate a change, then certain kind of disruption is bound to happen. So, but at the same time, we can make sure that these kind of changes are not abrupt. It doesn't really make anyone worse off, right? And for that, I think this committee will have to come brainstorm, think about ideas, think about possible solutions and outcomes, which can be, and my feeling is that there could be a common denominator on which countries can be. Sometimes it need not be the most ambitious one that can deliver on the ground. So it is a great project and very timely project, and we will be very happy to play our role from this part of the world.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time and wonderful comments. And as I mentioned to you as well, being here with your team, this is a collaboration that I think we have to continue. The Caribbean, India, the region, and Asia more generally, and basically collaboration through the Chairs program, through Trade Lab, enabling us to work more closely together as institutes. So thank you so much, and all the best.
I just want to mention that we are now engaged in multiple fronts, be it the CLN thing, the WTO Chair program, or the Trade Lab project, or the sustainability project.
Yes. Or
So
the
we
trip to Geneva project.
Absolutely. So we are actually engaged in multiple fronts, and my feeling is that over a period of time, we can actually be the catalyst, the change agents to bring in some kind of, not huge, albeit minor changes in the.
We play our part.
Absolutely. We have to play our part.
Thank you so much, and once again for the kind and generous invitation of you and the generosity of your team in hosting me whilst I've been here over the last 2 or 3 days. So thank you so much.
We take pride in the fact that we are good hosts.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.